The dining room of Whitmore House glittered with the golden light of 40 candles and the measured brilliance of London's finest company. Crystal glasses caught the flame and threw it back across the white linen tablecloths, and the conversation flowed in the easy, performative manner that characterized dinners of this particular variety. Everyone saying precisely what was expected of them and nothing more. At the far end of the long table, in the seat that had clearly been assigned with the gentle intention of keeping her out of anyone's line of sight, sat Miss Cornelia Ashwick. She was 25, which was not yet alarming by most standards, but was beginning to attract a certain quality of glance from married women of her mother's acquaintance. She had dark auburn hair pinned carefully above her neck, gray-green eyes that had a tendency to notice more than was strictly comfortable for the people around her, and a gown of pale green muslin that was 2 seasons old but had been carefully retrimmed to disguise the fact. She'd been told it was becoming. She suspected this was kindness. 3 seasons in London had produced precisely 0 serious offers of marriage. This was not, as several well-meaning ladies had suggested, because Cornelia was plain. It was because Cornelia had opinions about things, and a habit of expressing them at moments when silence would have been far more advantageous. That, combined with the very quiet but widely understood fact that Baron Ashwick's estate was mortgaged rather significantly, and his daughter's dowry was more suggestion than reality, meant that Cornelia had watched 3 seasons come and go with the philosophical detachment of someone who has stopped expecting a particular train and is simply watching the platform. Her mother, seated at the other end of the table and currently absorbed in conversation with the Earl of Pemberton, had insisted on this dinner. Lady Whitmore's dinners are always attended by the very best people, her mother had said that morning with a brightness that Cornelia recognized as determination in disguise. One never knows who one might meet. Cornelia had looked at her mother and at the gray circles under her eyes that she tried to hide with powder, and at the way her fingers twisted together when she thought no one was watching. She had put on the pale green gown without further argument. Now she sat at the far end of the table and watched the candles and waited for the evening to be over. "You look," said a voice to her left, "as though you are calculating precisely how many more minutes until you may reasonably leave." Cornelia turned. She had been introduced to the woman beside her at the beginning of the evening, Lady Eugenia Harcastle, Dowager Duchess of Ravenscroft. 70, perhaps, with silver hair arranged in an elaborate style and diamonds at her throat that were very clearly not paste. Her eyes were sharp and dark and entirely amused. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace," Cornelia said. "No, you don't," Lady Eugenia replied pleasantly. "But that's quite all right. I was doing the same calculation myself. These affairs do go on." She picked up her wineglass with the serenity of a woman accustomed to doing exactly as she pleased. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Ashwick, and spare me the rehearsed version. I've heard it from 12 young ladies this evening already." Cornelia looked at her for a moment. "What would you like to know?" "Are you clever?" "Yes." "Honest?" "Occasionally to my own detriment." "Excellent." Lady Eugenia set down her glass. "And are you looking for a husband?" Cornelia considered the table linen. "My mother is looking for a husband. I'm looking for a way to help my family that doesn't require me to be stupid about it." Lady Eugenia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think I like you enormously, Miss Ashwick." Before Cornelia could respond, a subtle shift moved through the room. Conversations paused, heads turned toward the doorway. A tall figure stood at the entrance to the dining room. He was broad-shouldered and dark-haired, perhaps 34, with gray eyes that swept the room with the calm authority of a man who never needed to announce himself because every room did it for him. He wore his evening clothes with a complete absence of vanity, as though he had put them on because they were required and thought nothing more about it. His expression was composed, formal, and entirely closed. "My grandson," Lady Eugenia said beside her with a satisfaction that Cornelia could not quite interpret. "James Harcastle, Duke of Ravenscroft. He is always late. I have given up remarking upon it." The Duke moved through the room, exchanging brief nods with the other guests, and took the empty seat near the center of the table. He did not look in Cornelia's direction once. She told herself this was of no interest to her whatsoever. She almost believed it. The syllabub had just been set down when Lady Eugenia Harcastle rose from her chair. This was unusual enough to command attention. A woman of 70 does not generally stand during the dessert course unless something significant is about to occur. The conversations around the table faltered and died, one by one, until the room was quiet. "Forgive the interruption," Lady Eugenia said, in a voice that suggested she did not find it necessary to be forgiven. She looked along the length of the table with the calm confidence of someone about to make a perfectly ordinary announcement. "I have news which I am certain will delight our company this evening." She paused. "My grandson, the Duke of Ravenscroft, is engaged to be married to Miss Cornelia Ashwick." The room erupted. Cornelia's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down very carefully. Her heart was performing an extremely alarming series of maneuvers in her chest. She looked down the table. The Duke of Ravenscroft was looking at her. His expression was absolutely still. Not angry. She would have understood angry. Simply very, very still, in the manner of a man who has just been ambushed in public and is deciding how to respond. Cornelia looked at him across 30 feet of linen and crystal and 40 blazing candles. His eyes said, "I had no idea this was going to happen." Hers said, "Neither did I, and I would like you to know that immediately." He held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Something shifted in his expression, so small that she might have imagined it. Then Lady Whitmore was beside her, clasping her hands, and the congratulations descended like an avalanche. And Cornelia smiled and said thank you, and continued saying thank you for the next 40 minutes, because there was absolutely nothing else to be done. This was not happening. This was absolutely, completely, categorically happening. He called the next morning at 10 o'clock. Cornelia had been awake since 5. She had sat in the window of her mother's Mayfair townhouse and watched the street below and thought very deliberately about what she was going to say to the Duke of Ravenscroft when she saw him. She had a plan. It was a good plan. She would be calm, direct, and practical. She would acknowledge the absurdity of the situation. She would agree to a swift and quiet retraction. She would thank him for his understanding, and that would be that. The Duke was shown into the drawing room at 10 past the hour. He was taller than she remembered. His gray eyes found her immediately. "Miss Ashwick," he said. "Your Grace," she replied. They looked at each other. "My grandmother," he began. "Yes," Cornelia agreed. I owe you an apology." "You owe me rather more than that," Cornelia said, "though I accept that the fault is not entirely yours." Something moved in his expression. "No," he said, "it is not." He sat down in the chair she indicated. "I came to discuss how we might resolve this as quietly as possible." "I've been thinking about that," Cornelia said. "I thought you might speak to your grandmother, and I would speak to my mother, and we might agree on a suitable explanation for ending the engagement before it becomes any more public than it already." "It was in the morning papers," the Duke said. Cornelia closed her eyes. "Of course it was. 3 of them. Naturally. My grandmother has apparently been corresponding with the social editors for some time." He paused. "She is very organized." Cornelia opened her eyes. "Your Grace, how long has your grandmother been planning this?" "I asked her that this morning," he said. "She told me approximately 3 months." 3 months. "She has been watching you since Lady Fenton's charity tea in February." He looked at her with an expression that was not quite apology and not quite amusement, and was somehow both simultaneously. "She described you as the only sensible woman in any room she had entered this season." Cornelia stared at him. "She barely spoke to me until last evening." "My grandmother operates on intelligence she does not announce," the Duke said. "It is one of her more alarming qualities." The silence stretched between them, and then Cornelia said, "This cannot be undone, can it? Not without a degree of scandal that would damage you considerably more than me," he said. He said it directly, without dressing it up, and she found she appreciated that. "I am aware of the unfairness of that." "Are you?" "Yes." His gray eyes were steady and clear. "Which is why I want to be direct with you, Miss Ashwick. I have no wish to trap you in an arrangement you did not choose, but I also cannot allow you to bear the consequences of withdrawing from it. So I am suggesting a courtship, 3 weeks, public and visible, at the end of which we may find a mutually agreeable reason to part that reflects well on both of us." Cornelia considered this. "And if we cannot find one?" "Then we will have 3 more weeks to think of something," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, he agreed. The problem with 3 weeks, Cornelia discovered, was that they went rather quickly when one was paying attention to the wrong things. The Duke of Ravenscroft was not what she had expected. She had expected cold. She had expected the formal, closed man she had seen across the Whitmore dinner table. What she encountered instead, in the succession of social appearances their arrangement required, was something considerably more complicated. He was observant, quietly, systematically observant, in a way that she only noticed because she was the same. At Lady Harrington's garden party, 3 days into their arrangement, he appeared at her elbow with a glass of lemonade at the precise moment she had been thinking about going to find one. "How did you know?" she asked. "You glanced toward the refreshment table twice in the last 5 minutes, he said, as though this were an entirely unremarkable thing to have noticed. She looked at him. He looked back at her. "I do that too," he said after a moment. "Watch rooms. It is a useful habit." "Most people find it unsettling," Cornelia said. "Most people are not paying attention," he replied. It was the first time she saw him say something with what she could only identify as dry amusement, and it disarmed her entirely. At the theater 4 days later, they argued. It started over a small thing, a comment he made about the education reform bill currently before Parliament, and became, quite rapidly, a conversation that lasted through the entire interval and most of the second act, conducted in undertones that grew steadily less quiet as they both forgot to be careful. You cannot seriously believe that restricting access to education serves any long-term economic interest, Cornelia said. I said no such thing, he replied. I said the current bill is poorly drafted. That is an entirely different position and one you arrived at just now. It is the position I have always held. It is not the position you expressed 20 minutes ago. He was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, a smile crossed his face. Not the polite social version she had seen at various gatherings. Something smaller and genuine and warm. No, he admitted. It is not. Something shifted in Cornelia's chest. She looked away at the stage. You're good at that, he said. Arguing people into honesty. I've been told it's a character flaw, she said. By people who found it inconvenient, he replied. She did not look at him, but she was smiling. 2 days later, he sent her roses. No note, just roses. She stood in the entrance hall of her mother's house holding them and felt something she was not prepared to name. This is an arrangement, Cornelia, she told herself firmly. 3 weeks, that is all. But that evening, sitting at her writing table, she found herself thinking not about the arrangement ending, but about what he had said at the theater, about the way he had looked at her when she proved him wrong, about the roses. She put the thought away. She was not entirely successful. Lady Vivian Caldwell arrived at the Pemberton Garden party on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing a gown of ivory silk that managed to be both entirely appropriate and entirely devastating. She was 8 and 20, dark-haired, and possessed of the kind of beauty that required very little arrangement, and was fully aware of this fact. She moved through the garden with the ease of someone who had never once doubted her right to be at the center of any room, and she arrived at Cornelia's side with a smile so warm that it took Cornelia a full 3 seconds to understand that it did not reach her eyes. Miss Ashwick, she said. How delightful. I've been so hoping to meet you. Lady Vivian, Cornelia replied. The pleasure is mine. Isn't this all rather sudden? Lady Vivian said pleasantly. An engagement announced over dessert. Lady Eugenia does have her particular methods. She tilted her head slightly. I hope you know what you're taking on. James can be rather demanding, of a certain type of woman. I imagine he can, Cornelia said. He has very specific requirements, Lady Vivian continued. He has always needed someone who could keep pace with him. Intellectually, I mean. Socially. She smiled again. I do hope you are finding it manageable. Cornelia looked at her pleasantly. I find most things manageable, she said. Thank you for your concern. Lady Vivian's smile held for exactly 1 second too long. Then she moved away with a murmured excuse, and Cornelia stood very still and breathed carefully. It mattered a little. She felt the Duke's presence before she saw him. He appeared at her side without fanfare, his expression calm. Lady Vivian has been talking to you, he said. She came to wish me well, Cornelia said. Did she? Very warmly. I can imagine, he said, with a dryness that told her everything about his understanding of the exchange. He glanced toward where Lady Vivian was now entertaining a group of admirers across the garden. She expected. There were expectations on her part that I did not encourage and perhaps did not discourage adequately. I owe you an explanation. You don't, Cornelia said. I think I do. He turned to face her. She has every quality that society considers ideal. I've known for 2 years that she believed we would eventually marry. He paused. I've also known for 2 years that I could not do it. Why not? He was quiet for a moment. Because she has never once disagreed with me about anything, he said. Cornelia stared at him. Not once, he said. In 2 years. That must have been very boring, Cornelia said. He looked at her. Then quietly he laughed. A real laugh. Brief, surprised, entirely genuine. And something in Cornelia's chest stopped being manageable altogether. His grandmother's house in Grosvenor Square had a garden that was too small for the house and too beautiful for London. All roses and gravel paths and a stone bench under a wisteria just beginning to bloom. Cornelia found herself there after dinner on the 14th day of their arrangement. She'd come outside for air. She told herself this was the only reason. She heard his footsteps on the gravel before she saw him. He sat down at the other end of the bench. They were quiet for a moment. My father's marriage was miserable, he said suddenly. She turned to look at him. He married my mother because it was a suitable match. They both did their duty and were deeply, quietly unhappy for 30 years. He looked at the wisteria above them. He told me once, I was perhaps 15, that the greatest mistake a man could make was to trap a woman in a marriage she had not genuinely chosen, that he had done this and regretted it every day. He paused. It is the only advice my father ever gave me that I kept. Cornelia was quiet for a moment. Is that why you have avoided marriage? It is why I've avoided arrangements, he said. He looked at her then. This began as one. I want you to know that I am aware of that. I am aware of it too, Cornelia said carefully. Yes. His gray eyes were serious and very direct. I know you are. The wisteria moved slightly in the evening air. Somewhere in the house, voices and laughter drifted through the open windows. You're not what I expected, Miss Ashwick, he said. What did you expect? Someone easier to overlook, he said simply. Her heart did something she was not going to acknowledge. She looked away at the roses. She told herself firmly that there were 6 more days in their arrangement, and at the end of them she would find a quiet and dignified way to withdraw, and she would go home. And she would not think about stone benches or wisteria or gray eyes that were more honest than they had any right to be. She was not entirely convincing even to herself. On the last day of the 3 weeks, Cornelia wore her best dress. She told herself this was coincidence. She was in Lady Eugenia's drawing room, having been summoned for afternoon tea in terms that made it clear attendance was not optional. When the Duke came in, he stopped when he saw her. Something moved across his face quickly and was gone. His grandmother set down her teacup and looked between them with an expression of profound satisfaction. I have just remembered, she said. rising with the smooth ease of a woman who has never done anything by accident in her life, that I have a letter to write. She was gone before either of them could speak. The drawing room was very quiet. "The 3 weeks end today," Cornelia said. "Yes," he said. "I've been thinking about a suitable explanation," she said. "I thought perhaps an acknowledgement of incompatibility, amicably arrived at. It would reflect well on both." "Cornelia." She stopped. He never used her given name. He had been careful about that the entire 3 weeks. He crossed the room and stood before her. His grey eyes were entirely open, and she realized, with a jolt, that she had never actually seen him look like this before. Without the composed formality he wore like armor in every room he entered. "I don't want an explanation," he said. "I don't want to end this." He paused. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly." She could not speak. She nodded. "You argued me into a better position on parliamentary reform," he said, "in a theater, during the second act, and you were right, and you knew you were right, and you didn't soften it to spare my pride, and I thought about it for 3 days afterwards." He looked at her steadily. "You thanked my valet by name when we arrived at the Pemberton party. He mentioned it to me the following morning because no one had done that in 6 years of his service." He took a breath. "You sent yourself roses when you were thinking. I noticed. I sent you roses because I wanted you to know that I had noticed." Her eyes were very bright. "I did not choose this arrangement," he said. "My grandmother chose it for me, and I was furious, and she was entirely right, which is the most irritating thing she has ever done, and she has done many irritating things." He paused. "I love you, Cornelia. Not the arrangement, not the convenience. You, specifically, as you actually are." A tear escaped before she could prevent it. "You might have said something sooner," she said. "I've been talking myself out of this for 3 weeks." "I know," he said. "I could see you doing it. You're not as composed as you believe." She laughed, a small, unsteady sound. "That is not a romantic thing to say." "I am not a romantic man," he said. "I am a man who is entirely, specifically in love with you, which is a different thing." She looked at him. He looked back at her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, what?" "Yes to all of it," she said. "The arrangement, the 3 weeks, the grandmother, all of it. Yes." He crossed the distance between them and took her face in his hands, and kissed her with such careful deliberateness that it was the least cautious thing she had ever experienced. From somewhere down the corridor, they both heard Lady Eugenia Harcastle make a sound that was unmistakably, unrepentantly, the sound of a woman who has been proved exactly right. They were married 6 weeks later at St. George's, Hanover Square, on a morning when the wisteria in Grosvenor Square was in full bloom. The ton came in large numbers, partly from genuine goodwill, and partly from the same curiosity that had attended the announcement. They wanted to see, with their own eyes, whether it was real. It was real. The Duke of Ravenscroft looked at his bride during the ceremony the way he had looked at her across the Whitmore dinner table, directly, without pretense, without performance. Only this time he was not calculating a response. He was simply looking at her. Society saw it. Society talked about it for 3 seasons. Lady Vivian Caldwell sent a generous wedding gift and departed for her family's estate in Northumberland the following week. She did not return to London that season. Lady Eugenia Harcastle received guests for the entire month of June and accepted congratulations with a graciousness that barely concealed her triumph. 4 years later, the library at Ravenscroft House in the evenings belongs to 3 people and one extremely opinionated cat that had arrived uninvited 2 years ago and never left. Charlotte, who is 3 and already alarmingly like her mother, is sitting in the large chair by the window with a picture book she cannot yet read, narrating its contents from memory with considerable confidence. Baby Edward, 4 months, is in Cornelia's arms and is currently asleep in the manner of someone who has decided that the world is satisfactory and will continue to be so. James is at his desk, reading correspondence. He is, Cornelia has noted, not actually reading it. He is watching Charlotte. "She has the wrong story," he says quietly without looking up. "That is the book about the dog. She is telling it as the book about the rabbit." "She has combined them," Cornelia says. "She does that. The rabbit didn't fall in the pond. That was the dog. James. The narrative is inaccurate. She is 3. He looks up. His expression when he looks at his daughter is not the composed, formal face he shows the world. It is something entirely unguarded, in the manner of a man who had not expected to love anyone this much and is still mildly surprised by it. Charlotte looks up from her book. "Papa, the rabbit fell in the pond." "Quite right," he says immediately. Cornelia presses her lips together to contain her smile. Later, after Charlotte has been taken to bed and Edward settled for the night, they sit together in the library in the quiet that has become their particular comfort. James with his papers, Cornelia with her correspondence, the fire low and warm between them. "Do you know what I was thinking about today?" Cornelia says. "The syllabub," he says, without looking up. She stares at him. "How did you?" "You always think about the syllabub when something makes you happy," he says. The expression is the same. He sets down his papers and looks at her. "Your grandmother announced our engagement to 40 strangers over dessert before I knew your name." "His grandmother," Cornelia says. "In this family," he says, "the distinction is academic." He reaches across and takes her hand. "I love you. I've loved you since you looked at me across that table with an expression of pure, magnificent exasperation." "That was not love," Cornelia says. "That was alarm." "Close enough," he says. "In my experience, the two are frequently indistinguishable." She looks at him. This man who noticed she glanced at the lemonade twice, who sent roses without a note, who still argues with her about parliamentary reform and is still occasionally wrong about it, who looks at their daughter with that helpless expression that she knows he shows no one else. "I love you," she says. "Grandmother and all." He squeezes her hand. "She will be unbearable when she hears you say that." "She already knows," Cornelia says. "She has always known." His smile, when it comes, is the small genuine one, the one she first saw at a theater during the second act, the one that changed everything. "Yes," he says. "She rather has." The fire crackles and settles. Outside, the London night continues its business. Inside the library at Ravenscroft House, the Duke and Duchess sit with their hands clasped, building a life that had started with an announcement they did not make, and a love they had not planned, and that had become, in 4 years, the truest thing either of them had ever known. The end. Dear listener, sometimes the best things in our lives arrive without asking permission. Perhaps you know that feeling, when something you did not choose turns out to be exactly what you needed. A conversation you did not plan, a door that opened when you were not looking for it, a moment that rearranged everything quietly, without fanfare, while you were busy trying to manage your expectations. Cornelia walked into that dinner planning to be invisible. She walked out engaged to a man she'd never met. And in between those 2 moments, something happened that she had not anticipated. She was seen, not performed for, not managed from a distance, not handled carefully. Seen precisely and specifically by someone who was paying attention. So many of us have spent years learning to take up less space, to want less, to expect less. We have told ourselves that our moment has passed, that the grand gestures belong to other people, that we are too old or too practical or too complicated for anything to surprise us anymore. We have become very skilled at talking ourselves out of things. But sometimes the grandmother stands up at the dinner table. Sometimes life interrupts our careful plans and places us somewhere we did not choose, with someone we did not expect. And it turns out that the universe has been paying attention even when we thought no one was. You do not need to have it all figured out. You do not need to have planned for it. Sometimes the very fact that you stopped performing and simply showed up, exactly as you are, opinions and all, is the thing that changes everything. Tonight, as you rest, let yourself release the plan for a moment, the careful management of expectations, the story you have already written for yourself. Your most beautiful chapter may be the one you have not yet imagined. Sleep well, dear friend. Someone, somewhere, is paying attention. With love. From all of us at Fables of Love. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If it made you laugh, cry, or believe in love all over again, we would be so grateful if you liked this video, left a comment, and subscribed to the channel. Sharing it with someone who loves historical romance means the world to us and keeps our storytelling corner alive. Another story is waiting for you at the end of this video. Click, listen, and let your heart be swept away once more. From all of us at Fables of Love, thank you for being here.